Hello, and welcome to the Two Stewards Show. I am Mark, and I'm here with Brent.
I am Brent.
Yes, you are Brent. Welcome, Brent.
Brent, I am. Sorry. We had, this school had Dr. Zeus Day this week, so.
Yeah, that's right.
I'm all Dr. Zeus out.
Are you?
I think so.
We had thing number 1 and thing number 2.
Yeah.
And red fish, blue fish. I can't remember. 1 fish, 2 fish, red fish, blue fish.
Yeah, I don't know.
One of those, and we also had a wasket in a basket.
Okay.
So, what did you have, Brent?
Same I am. Green eggs and ham. There was no bites out of the ham when it came back. So.
Oh, no? Anyways, that's the only fun thing we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
We got some new numbers out. All kinds of different numbers. Some of them big, some of them small. Apparently, we've got just on the Canada side of things, which is where we are. So, hey,
Is it more like A?
We have up to 4.9 million temporary residents in Canada. So that's up. I think we kind of knew there was 3 million-ish, but this is up significantly.
But you went around and counted them all.
Yeah. Well, I had to do it twice because I got confused at 2.5 million, so I had to start over. No, but this is the number that's floating around, and I don't know if it's entirely accurate. Some of it may be. Some people may be double counted in that because they have two forms of temporary residency or something. But anyways, for a country of 41 million people, that's like, I don't know, what is that, 12% or 13% or something is temporary residence. Crazy. So the Liberal government is kind of talking tough now, right? They're like, oh, we got to do something about this. This problem that came out of nowhere that we could not have predicted. But talking about, deportations and things like this. And it's like, really?
I think they need to create a country between the U.S. and Canada for all the deportees to kind of land in a little strip in between.
But that's Canada. That's where all our population is, in that little 100-kilometer strip between.
Yeah. We need to create a 10-kilometer strip.
Okay.
For our deportees and their deportees to kind of be.
Oh, man. Yeah, like you got the U.S.,
that's a
Canadian
good idea.
cities, and then Moose. That's pretty well how it goes. But no, we're seeing these students who are in day like 45 of protests saying like, these are all mostly Indian students that are upset that their visas are expiring. They're going to have to leave. And they're like, this isn't fair. And like, they've been, give them credit. They've been doing it for like 45 days in different areas. And like, you think they're just going to leave when we say, okay, your time's up, time to go? Like, they're not.
Yeah.
Right? They were promised the good life, they said, and we're not following through on those promises. And I mean, we've talked about, like, we didn't make these promises, but
do you have data on how many temporary residents, like just for context, going back, or this is just currently where we're at? And
I wouldn't. If we did, I wouldn't trust any of those numbers. Remember when they found another million residents or temporary residents? Right. That was, I think, Benjamin Tal. He's an economist at the Bank of Montreal, I want to say.
Yeah.
And he did a little bit of number crunching and stuff. He's like, guys, I think your numbers are wrong. I think there's like another 1.1 million people here. And then the government, they went off into the corner and conferred and did some numbers and like, oh yeah, I think he's right. So
then they just had the same sort of reaction with the GDP numbers. Was it GDP or they just suddenly discovered another year's worth of GDP or whatever?
All these numbers hiding in the corners, like, oh man, it really makes you wonder. Okay, so here's another number. 2023, we added 94,000 jobs in total in Canada, in the country. So, if you think about it, we know the federal government has expanded and continues to expand rapidly. So that was a lot of private sector losses to come up with only 94,000 added in total, because there's way more public sector jobs added. But anyway, so yeah, that's not great. But we added
So
one
that's
point.
that's net. Right?
Net.
Yeah.
Yeah. After all the adding and subtracting, we added 1.4 million people to the country
In the same time period.
in 2023.
All right, I got to get my calculator out here, Mark. Did you already do this math?
No, I didn't.
1.4
but,
million.
it's big.
Wait, 93,000?
94,000.
So 1.3 million
And change.
and change?
Yeah. Like, just boggles the mind, right? And then we wonder why we're having problems. And, now they're going to get tough on immigration. And, like, they're not. They're not. This was not.
So if somebody new comes to the country and they count on those statistics, right? Like a new population growth statistics, that's that 1.4 million you mentioned. They're obviously on there, but would they have a job? They just come here, they don't have a job, and then the statistic you quoted, a $93,000 or 93,000 jobs.
No, these are independent statistics. So
Yeah.
the jobs thing is one thing. That's all the jobs that were added.
Okay.
Population growth is a different thing. So some of those are students, right? Who,
Maybe
don't
they're really
necessarily have
rich
jobs.
people with lots of money who just are going to stimulate the economy by spending. Mark, have you ever thought of that?
No, they're all leaving.
Oh.
Oh man, actually, that reminds me. Side note of Norway. I've been reading about this lately, right? So they have people. We've been talking here and in the States about the unrealized capital gains taxes. So Norway actually has that. So
Where if you don't sell your asset,
you're still taxed
still
based on the
taxed.
increase in value. So you have people who are starting up companies, and these companies are growing and growing, and they're doing well. And so if you own this company, let's say it's a private startup, right, and it's worth $1 billion, well, you're getting taxed on whatever the growth was of that company this year. So you have all these tech founders who have these massive tax bills, and like they can't pay them because they physically do not have the money.
yeah.
Government's like, oh, too bad. So you're seeing this huge exodus of company founders leaving Norway. So something like 100 of the 400 top taxpayers in Norway in the last couple of years have just left the country.
Good. We don't want them anyways.
Yeah. Ski bosh. We don't need them. Rich people. No, but like what? Like how insane is that, right? And so
They're clearly coming to Canada then, right?
they're not coming to Canada, man. They're all going like somewhere warm. South America or
Norway.
something
So
like that.
this is a chart from Ben Rabidou, our buddy over at Edge Analytics. So,
Yep.
and Norway's beating Canada on this list of so non-financial corporate debt service ratios. So if you have a company and you have a high amount of debt in that company, Norway is like the only country beating Canada, and then it's all the other.
they have more debt?
Yeah,
Oh, really? Interesting.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, corporate debt.
Yeah.
So yeah, like Canada's second, but behind Norway. So maybe that's part of the reason why. I don't know.
Yeah, maybe, but it's a good illustration of what happens when you actually implement these taxes, right? Because some of these guys are just like, what do I do?
Yeah.
I've created value, I've hired people, I've created, like, we talk about this all the time, right? Like, what do you do?
Yeah,
right?
okay.
What did Jimmy
I gotta
Sun
let
say?
you in on a little story because I was just on the phone like a couple weeks ago with two individuals who were in Canada, Canadians, born and raised,
Yep.
and then moved to the U.S.
Yes.
in the last 5 years, and both will say they will never come back to Canada.
Because of
Basically, Canada kills the entrepreneurial spirit and
Okay.
provides no business opportunities and does not support business or growth or risk or trying anything. So it's an interesting thing because when we talked about it, like how economy or value is created by taking risks, trying things, starting a business, doing something, adding value to clients, right? And then getting paid
Yeah.
and growing that over time. And, the wealthy business owner actually is providing the most value, right? But we're
by taking so it's not just like crazy risk,
Yeah.
it's calculated risk, right?
yeah. You use your talents in a way that you assess the situation in the market and where can I use my gifts, my talents, my relationships, my resources to best serve people
Yep.
who will value what I have to offer, and then that's how the economy grows, right? Like you take that calculated risk and you put your resources behind it, maybe even get other people to invest their resources in it. And then it grows. If it's successful and people like it and want to trade their money for it, it'll grow. If not, then it will fail, right? And the market system is just set up that way. But
like a cricket farm.
Yeah. We talked about that last time. That one's thriving, right? You're one of the biggest customers.
Nope.
But if you think about it, then if a government or regulations step in and start tamping down that entrepreneurial spirit by, doing these taxes like you talked about Norway, where they're taxing unrealized gains. So you didn't sell your business or you didn't sell your real estate or you didn't sell your property or whatever.
Yep.
We still going to charge you the tax on that because that appeals to our voter base on this side who doesn't want to help anybody.
Because you're a rich parasite.
Yeah. So if you have that attitude creeps in and that's the culture, like how liberating is it to escape that and go somewhere where you're actually valued and, it's encouraged, right? So that was the conversation and that was kind of the crux of it. And it went on for about an hour and a half of like a lot of different yelling about things. And I was mostly the recipient. It's like, you Canadian. It's like, you guys are Canadians too.
Yeah, you were Canadian.
You just left us to die here. Like,
man.
I don't know if any of our listeners would feel that pain if they're entrepreneurs or business owners, but.
Well, I've heard the same story from other people as well. Same thing. They're like, we love Canada. We love the people, but we're never going back. Right.
Yeah.
I mean, there's two aspects to it, right? There's one is the, it's one aspect, two aspects of government intervention, right? We talk about capitalism and the free market economy. It's like, we don't have that. And even in the States, you could argue it's not true capitalism, but it's at least more unfettered.
Foch call it like the oligopoly. Like in any major industry in Canada, there's 5 big companies. There's 5 big banks. There's 5 big, cell phone providers, whatever. Like you go down the list, and there's how many big real estate developers? Probably 5. I don't know.
Well, yeah, because so not only do they make it super hard to so all the ones that these big companies that are around have been around for a long time.
Yeah,
they were able to start up before all the extreme. Like the red tape really got bad, and they've just managed to, if you're bigger and you have more resources, you can deal with you can hire someone to deal. And companies have this, right? Director of red tape or whatever.
Yeah, get added to our merch list. We're gonna do shirts with the big red tape scissors on it, or like, guys, we're making merch, so it's gonna be great.
We think it's going to be great.
We're going to wear it. I don't know.
Yeah. That's early.
If you see us on the
Christmas
street
present for
walking
me.
around with the big red tape scissors shirt or
My favorite's going to be the avocado toast shirt. I am looking forward to that.
Oh, man.
But, okay, so 2 aspects, right? One is the government, like, adding red tape and really stomping on people. So it's like we talked about taking the calculated risk, right? So you do the math, and people are just like, no, it's not. It's not worth it. In the States.
Not in this jurisdiction, it's not worth it.
Yeah, I've done the math. Just like doing a real estate, like a pro forma, right? You do the math and this house is not going to work out. But then you have the additional distortion of the government funding businesses that should not be funded, right?
Yeah.
Like the cricket farm, for example, right? $7 million down the drain. And, even if it made it successful, was it still worth it? Right? It's not like the government is investing in getting a return. You don't think
the government made a calculated risk on that?
No, not calculated.
Maybe we just need to give them good calculators.
Well, I mean, so they also have a different calculus. No, but they have a different risk assessment structure, right?
Right. There is no downside. It's not my money.
Well, no, they're not. It's not strictly financial.
Right.
Right. It's like we want people to not eat meat, for example. So how could you put a price on that?
Of course, we want to reduce emissions from cow farts and
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, these poor flatulent cows. But yeah, just lots of examples of like where they're funding stuff. I talk about till I'm blue in the face, right? Yeah. You got like Northvolt investments in that. You've got Telesat funding for like just constant, right? And so that's the additional distortion where they're propping up companies that shouldn't thrive.
Here's an idea. Like, what if we asked the politicians to expose where they are investing their money?
It would be so. I mean, people have talked about Trudeau's net worth increasing substantially since he's been.
And it's
Prime
like, why don't
Minister.
you just do with Canada's money what you're doing with your money? Like, and if it's fraud, well, then maybe you shouldn't be doing that. Like,
Well, I mean, there's the whole $400 million green slush fund, right? Which
there is. Okay.
Oh yeah, yeah, dude. Don't get me started.
Okay. Well, tell me what a slush fund is, because
It's the I
like
can't remember what the
snow, not
official
slush, but
the official name is, but it's essentially a fund for environmental stuff to promote environment stuff, right?
okay. So the RCMP is doing investigation. I haven't heard about it because they don't think it's really good, important thing to share.
I mean, it's been out there, right? It depends how big the rock is that you live under, but no,
Pardon,
it's
I can't
not,
hear you under this rock.
No, it's not widely reported, but if you look for it, you can find it, right? There's commissions. I mean, we've talked about different ministers who have allegedly benefited from the Green Slush Fund. And yeah, the Liberals just passed a motion to stop all debate on this topic. Like they literally said, okay, we have a motion to stop debate on any talk about this environmental fund or whatever, and it passed. So just crazy, right? So I don't know what's going to, because there's still inquiries that are going on. So I don't know what's going to happen there. But
Yeah, this says the investigation is ongoing. There are investigations ongoing. So
yeah,
Okay.
lots of them. So it's just, and like there's several egregious examples of, I don't know what you call it, but when you just pay out for no value, right? You
Yeah,
just
so
pay for nothing.
just to
stuff.
jump back to the business insolvencies in
Right.
Canada and how hard it is. Well, that's an important thing to look at maybe just let me start here. So the Bank of Canada has to look at factors in order to increase or reduce the interest rate.
Yep.
And they essentially don't care about factors in the economy that they can control,
Like what?
like the interest rate, or like let's say mortgage interest cost or whatever.
Okay,
Like
right.
if they reduce the rate, that affects whatever, right?
Right.
And they also don't really care about. This is kind of coming from Ben's latest report. He's talking about interest rate moves.
Ben
and whether they
Rabideau.
wanna- Yeah, Ben Rabideau.
Edge Analytics.
So they also don't care about factors they can control, right, or have an influence on. Okay, so that's what I said. And then they don't care about ones that are trending in the right direction, right? That they're going
Right.
like, rents. So for example, rents. Anecdotally, like we're leasing units now. You're probably leasing units too. We've seen a decline. So we've had
Yep.
a handful of units that have rented, past 2-3 years at one rate, and now the new rate that the tenants are locking in at is slightly lower than
Yeah, it might
what
be
was.
50 or $100 lower.
Yeah, and I mean this time of the year it's not great either, but so there's a data point for sure that rents are slowing down, and
Yep.
I mean we're gonna see that continue, I think, because we're gonna have a lot of these purpose-built rental, like the whole CMHC thing we've talked about,
Yep.
a lot of purpose-built rentals being built coming online, and then the population thing you guys you just keep hammering on, right? We start every episode talking about population growth. But one of the things he noted that we should kind of keep an eye on is business insolvencies in
Yeah.
Canada, right? Because that's going to impact the Bank of Canada's decision on where they put rates, right? Are they going to raise them in the face of growing business insolvencies that the Bank of Canada can't control and are not trending in the right direction?
And what's driving the insult? Like, he doesn't have the data on there, but do you think that high interest rates are part of what's driving the? Sorry, they're not high. Sorry, interest rates that are
that have increased
that have
rapidly.
increased
Yeah.
rapidly. Is that contributing?
I think so, because the start, business insolvencies have been trending down since 2008.
Yep.
And they kind of bottomed out 2022. So for that whole period of time, there's kind of been this downward trend of businesses seem to be improving. There's less insolvencies.
Yeah.
And then there's ever since then, with the interest rate cycle, it's just, you follow the line right up. So I think it has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
I wish I was an expert. So maybe we got Ben on, but
Yeah, maybe.
but he points to Ontario being where we are, filing surged. So business insolvency filings surged 26% year over year. Now 3 times what they were at the lows in 2021. So yeah, there's more and more businesses who are saying, I can't make this work.
Well, and who had probably temporary funding during
through COVID, there was some programs, right? Which is interesting. He kind of gives a breakdown of the industry. So like construction's up 22%, like the business insolvency filings, manufacturing's 31%.
Wow.
Wholesale's up 45%, transportation's up 32%, and real estate services up 57%.
Sorry, when you say insolvencies, is this, are we talking delinquency or straight up insolvencies?
That's insolvencies.
Okay, so this isn't, okay,
there's
because we looked at
data.
delinquency too. But delinquency that's referring to loans that they can't pay back.
Yeah, that's this chart I showed. Mark and I were talking off the air earlier about these really cool hockey stick graphs.
Like that one's crazy, right?
Small business delinquencies have just kind of shot off.
Wow.
But yeah, that's people not being able to afford their loans, right?
Yeah, but then that doesn't include businesses that just shut down and maybe they don't owe anything, but they're just like done.
Yeah.
Which is what you're talking about with insolvencies. Yeah. That could include losses.
And we talked about how, if a business goes out of business, like how quickly does that turn around? Like you can't just start up a new business. Like, have you ever started a business? It takes like a long time to figure this out.
Yeah, actually starting it is easy, but like registering it, but
registering
getting it going, that's a whole lot. Well, and that's the thing, right? So these are all presumably entrepreneurs. I mean, well, obviously
what's left of our entrepreneurial spirit.
Yeah, so people that have started businesses are doing it and then like now are stopping. So what happens to that entrepreneur? Some of them will just go on again and start a new business and a new business. But when you have an insolvency, like there's a whole story there, right? I would assume, and I don't have the data, but often it's not just like, okay, that didn't work, we're going to shut it down and let me try something else. It's like, oh man, I got all this debt I can't pay back. And there's like personal trauma and there's debt and like you're in trouble.
Yeah.
And you're gonna what do you do, right? You go get a job.
Personal trauma. I just think crying in the corner. Ooh, here's some data the government I forgot about.
Well, I mean, we have to talk about numbers, but there's a human face behind all these, behind each number, right? So that might be someone who's never going to start a business again. And that's
all these things bode well for our country.
That's my point. Like long term, it's not a good look. So, anyways,
glorious
insolvencies
and
are up.
Glorious and free to move anywhere but Canada.
And you would think with all the extra people that we've imported, that it should be a booming economy, right? So I guess that kind of throws that argument out the window that just straight population growth is not necessarily just good for your economy. GDP is down.
Yeah.
Again, for the 6th consecutive quarter.
So what do you think that says about rate cuts, like where this is going? Because I think the latest data is kind of brought into question. We were on this downward trajectory. It's okay, we're going to lower, it's going to come. And then we've heard like some news. It's like, oh, inflation, this and that, whatever. And like, oh, maybe they won't lower as much. Oh, man,
it is so hard. I mean, I used to have a much stronger stance, like the government can't raise rates, right? And that was true for quite a while.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden they raised rates. I'm like, wow, it's out the window.
I should throw out that book I wrote.
Long term, I think they can't have high rates. I mean, what's high, right? Historically high rates, I guess. But yeah, in the short term, inflation's creeping up, but I think there's going to be political pressure, right? Because if you ever watch House of Commons, like the Conservatives are on message and they're talking about food banks and Canadians not being able to afford anything.
Like unemployment,
So unemployment is up, inflation is rising, which is like
usually
that's
not
not a
supposed
good
to happen if you believe in MMT.
No, but that's fiscal
Phillips
dominance, right?
We just threw out a lot of big words. We sound so smart.
We've talked about, I mean, there's an episode on the Phillips curve, I think we did.
Yeah.
And
not sure how clearly we explained it.
Clearly enough. But yeah, usually if inflation's going up and unemployment is going down, because inflation means the economy is doing better, so more people are working, but that's not what we're seeing. So I think in the short term anyways, I'm not making long-term predictions, but short term, we're going to see more cuts. There's going to be political pressure, and we say
What do you think of the pressure from the tariffs?
Well, I mean,
U.S. Trump is like, we're at 25% on all goods.
So people are losing their minds over this, and it's like, have you people never heard of negotiations? Like, do you understand how this works? Right? Especially from Trump, right? He wrote The Art of the Deal. And like, when you're negotiating, you start, like usually
he was going to start at 100% on all goods, but he tempered it.
Okay, thanks. No, but if I want to, there's different ways of going about this, but if I want to sell you
a used car. Okay.
Well, yeah, okay, used car, fine, right? I've sold a few used cars, and like I'm going to list them higher than what I actually want to sell them for.
Yeah.
Because I know someone is going to be, someone just wants a deal. They don't care actually about the price. They just want to know that they saved money, right? So knowing that, I'm going to be like, okay, I'm going to sell it for $5,000. I'm going to list it at $5,000. If I get $4,000, I'm happy, right? And so then someone's going to come, Brent, you're Dutch,
like
so you're going to offer me $3,000.
Yeah.
Right. And I'm
if I get a catalytic converter out of the deal, I'm happy.
Yeah. So you go back and forth, and you come to a thing, right? And it's the same with, I don't know, all of life, military campaigns, politics. You're going to start with like a big stick, right? Trump's not going to start with like, here's a reasonable solution that will work for both. He's going to be like, I don't know, like with my kids. Yeah. I'm like, you clean your room now, or I'm going to, the world is going to end. And I just want him to do a little bit, right? Yeah. But I'm just like,
at least just pick up those two things right there.
Yeah, but I'm not going to say that. Get this room
fine,
clean.
Pick up one of them.
Yeah, and eventually there's still Lego all over the floor. Yeah. But right, so like it's
has
negotiations.
Anyone invented a Lego vacuum cleaner yet? By the way,
it's just called a vacuum cleaner.
Yeah, but that doesn't suck up all the other stuff.
Oh, yeah, I don't know
like
how
hair
to discriminate.
Okay.
Oh, AI. We do AI vacuum cleaner.
Yeah. Okay.
Ooh. Okay. Well, we shouldn't discuss this on the air.
No.
People are going to
steal it's Canada.
Ideas.
Nobody wants to start a business anyway.
That's true. Anyways.
But they say the headlines are like, this could be devastating for Canada's economy, right?
Yeah, Trump, it could be.
Yeah. But like it makes for good news, and like that's why I think people are losing their minds.
Yeah, I know, but like I look at it, I'm like, okay, this is step one. Trump's not even in office.
Yeah.
So he could pass
he's
the
not,
stuff
he's
day
acting
one.
Like he is. I don't know.
Well, it's the Trump effect, right? And there's other stuff I want to talk about. But yeah, so the tariffs. Yeah, that would be devastating for us, 25% across the board, right? That's not going to happen, people.
Yeah.
And if it is, because like he would do it.
If it did, that would put Canada in a recession.
No, but if it did, it's because we didn't do something.
Yeah.
Right?
Trudeau's like, okay.
Yeah. Right? So, and what was Trump talking about? It wasn't the economy. He was talking about the borders.
Drugs.
And drugs.
Yeah.
Okay, I think we can do something about that, right?
Yeah.
Like people are saying, like, what is he talking about? There's no drugs in Canada. Right? You talk about government support for small businesses and entrepreneurs. Yeah. It is alive and well in BC.
Yeah.
Judging by the number of fentanyl super labs that they have shut down. I mean, now they've taken a different stance on these poor independent pharmaceutical reps, as we like to call them, right? But I mean, that was the one of the businesses that was thriving in Canada, right? Drug production, money laundering. Talked about that with Sam Cooper and other stuff, right? And people are the same people who are like blindsided by these tariffs and saying like, what is he talking about, drugs? It's like, we're a huge supplier of fentanyl.
It's like 20% of our GDP,
Mexico.
Isn't it?
I mean, if you add it up, it's probably a big number, right? But no, we have a huge it drives me nuts, right? We have a huge problem with organized crime in Canada because in the 70s, they introduced the RICO Act, right? Racketeering, influence, and corrupt organizations in the States, right? They were targeting the mob and other businesses, but primarily the mob, right? And like the laws they had weren't it wasn't enough. So they introduced new laws. And guess what? Where did all the mob bosses go?
Yeah, because
to Montreal.
Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about that. Like the customer base for their product is in the States, right? Like that's where the money is.
Yeah, I mean, we see a lot of fentanyl overdoses.
Yeah,
in BC.
but I mean, just the volume of people and
it's the
transactions.
biggest.
Like, the economy for their
100%.
product is in there. But like, why aren't they there? Well, they're here because we welcome them with open arms. That's what you're saying.
Because it's so easy to. Well, number one, laundering the money is easy, right? All these major organizations have headquarters in Canada, right? Chinese guy that was just arrested or extradited to Australia is, I think, arrested in the States, sent to Australia, who are actually getting tough on this, but he's operating out of Markham, right? Like we think it's these big cities in the state. No, all these guys have headquarters in Canada, in different areas. So, not a week goes by that we don't see. In the last month and 2 months, a bust of a massive drug lab in Canada producing fentanyl, right? Because fentanyl is it's extremely profitable, right? And so Sam Cooper had posted about this, that CSIS knew and knows the locations of many of these drug labs. Why does CSIS know if it's a bunch of drug dealers, right? Well, it's national security because the money, the funding, the precursors, like the stuff you need to make fentanyl, is all coming from China.
Yeah.
It's being shipped through the port of Vancouver. And I mean, most of it's on the West Coast, and that's where all these busts are happening. And it's interesting because they're busting these labs, but nobody's getting arrested. Very curious, right? So anyways,
it's interesting
I think
that Trump is calling us out on it.
Well, it's funny, since Trump got elected, all of a sudden, bust. So it's the Trump effect, I think, as well.
They know that this can't fly under the radar anymore.
Oh, the U.S. is going to be serious about it. Because the U.S. has had just an open border policy, right, under Biden. Just like, whatever, anybody and everything can come through. So, okay, why? And, maybe part of it is like, if they're not going to be serious, why should we be serious? And now that they're serious, but I think part of it too is like, Trump is just going to cut us off. He's going to cut us out of Five Eyes. They're going to stop intelligence sharing. They're going to stop, who knows? Yeah. He'll do it. He's unpredictable. He'll slap us with tariffs, right? Maybe he'll say, you know what? We're not going to defend you.
And I'm in Canada, and I kind of hope he does. I don't know. What will change Canada, right? What will reform Canada? You need a wake-up call. You need a little bit I'm going to shake you. I
think we've had it because now the federal government is talking tough on immigration. Right? They've been talking a little bit about this and that over the past year, we need to tweak something. But now they're like, no, we gotta stop this, right? I don't know if you saw this clip of Mark Miller. He was heading into a meeting or something.
I don't just watch clips of Mark Miller all the time. But
what?
I prefer Chrystia Freeland.
Okay. I guess you and I have different habits, Brent. It's research for the show, okay? No, but there was an extremely, we'll say, progressive immigration advocacy group.
Yeah.
And they were trying to block entrance to Mark was going in for a meeting or something. And he just shoves the guy out, gives him a good shove out of the way, right? Just get out of the way, right? So even he has no time for these guys now.
Oh, man.
Which is an interesting change, right? Before they would have been sitting down and, eating crickets together or something. So you're seeing this Trump effect. Now that people know, I know people hate Trump, but whatever. There's an adult in the room now and he's it's like Dad's home, right?
Yeah.
Whatever you think about him.
Dad's home and the TV is still hot. I feel it.
Exactly. He's like, what is going on?
Yeah.
Some things are going to change around here. And that's essentially what he's doing.
Yeah.
Right? You know what? If you don't get to bed, you're getting a spanking, right? You know what? I am going to hit you with 25% tariffs.
Yeah.
I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. And there's a lot of it's bluster and whatever.
Yeah,
but
maybe it goes from a 25% spanking to a 10% spanking on some things.
Do you think he really wants tariffs?
Yeah, he wants trade. He wants.
This is one of his big.
Well, because you said before, tariffs are mutual. Right? If they put tariffs on, we're incentivized to put tariffs on too, so that we protect ourselves and.
Yeah, which is and that's fine. It'll go both ways, and we've seen trade wars happen, especially with China, with Trump before. So he's not afraid to use it either. It's not just all talk. But like in reality, like are we going to do that? They're our biggest trading partner. Like, so number one, like yeah, okay, we don't like the orange man threatening us, but you know what? Just smarten up. If you don't want a spanking, clean up your room.
Yeah.
Like what is these? Can you just be defiant? Sure, but then things aren't going to go well for you, right? And it's a no-brainer. Let's tighten up our border.
Yeah.
Right? And let's get rid of drug production. Like, we should be doing that.
Send all the drug producers to the oil fields to produce oil. They're good at producing stuff and selling it.
No, but it's just such like an insidious thing, right? You have all this laundered money, all this money coming from China and overseas, and that brings gangs. And then the money is laundered, and Iran too, right? Like, who do you think is funding all these pro-Palestine protests, right? Nobody in the Arab world cares about Palestine. Like, nobody. That's why if you look at the border between Gaza and Egypt, it's like razor wire, 15-foot walls, like watchtowers. Like, they do not want a single Palestinian coming over there, right? So anyways, all that to say that
we are officially on a tangent.
No, but whatever you think about the conflict, right?
Yeah.
All the protests and everything, they're being funded. And I can't prove this, but I'll just say it. It's Iran.
Yeah.
Right? Because they continually do this. And they have a strong presence in Canada.
We're going to make a list
money
of all of
laundering
Mark's
operations.
all of Mark's predictions, and we're just going to yearly read them out every New Year's Day and be like, did this come true? Not yet. Okay.
Did we prove that Iran is laundering money in Canada? Like,
there's two categories. Yes, it came true, or not yet.
Anyway, so I just lost my notes. I don't know what my point was, but
I don't know. That was one of your points, and I'm seeing your notes here. And
yeah, there's a lot more points.
yeah.
I know. No, but the point
Get to
is,
the next one.
we got to clean some stuff up and be serious. And we should do these things. Like, you should clean your room without having to be told. And like, is that because we're just growing up and we're learning responsibility? Like,
That's
we
like
should know
a
this
moral
stuff.
and cultural compass.
Yeah, and that points to a much bigger argument, right? Or a much bigger
issue,
conversation about like, where are we as a country? Where are we as a culture?
Yeah.
What happens when you abandon the truth? Like, all these things are just inevitable. It's bad enough when you hold to a standard of truth,
and then you make a mistake, or you get tempted,
or there's corruption or whatever. But when you out and out just abandon it, we see the cultural ramifications, and we see these other ones of like. And it has real life effects. Yeah. Right? Like the fentanyl thing. Yeah, mainly that's meant for selling in the States, but we see like just a huge numbers of opioid overdoses, especially in BC, because that's where it's produced. So it's like, some leaks out under the door or whatever. Like, it's just it's sad. It's sad. I don't know what else to say, but
other than to deeply
so another thing though that we can learn from this, which we haven't learned, is there's a big market all over the world for what we have, for petroleum products. And I know, petroleum products, right? But I think people are just getting wise to like, just shut up. Yeah. Like, we have oil. We're going to sell oil. Yeah. So let's build pipelines across this country, right? And let's refine the product here, because there's a lot of money we're leaving on the table by not refining it here. Yeah. And you know what? If you want to really make it all wonderful and nice, then let's do it ethically and sustainably in Canada, right? Oh. We have all these laws and all these rules. We are the most quote-unquote ethical oil producer in the world. We respect human rights, blah, 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 right? Yeah. Even if those are all your arguments. Let's do that here in Canada. And then let's sell these refined products to people who want them. And also, like, natural gas. We've had numerous countries knocking on our door, like Japan, Germany, I can't think of who else, but countries that have come and said, hey, can we get natural gas from you guys? Because we have, like, energy insecurity, and we don't want to depend on like Russia. Yeah. So it's just win-win. Let's get this built out.
See, I would vote for you, Mark. Like,
buddy, I'm telling you.
So does everyone have to invest in Alberta right now? Is that what you're saying? Like eventually this will happen, and it's
If people
like
I
either
don't know.
Canada dies or this happens, kind of.
Yeah,
thing.
I would be very bullish on Alberta right now with
Yeah.
a potentially incoming conservative government. And like,
I kind of lean
who
the same
knows?
way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, Alberta is the only province that's like keeping us somewhat afloat financially, right? Everybody else is. I mean, there's other provinces that are not receiving transfers, but those are small amounts. Alberta's really and like, so let's just build on that and let's make Albertans feel included in a sort of a. Oh, I just whacked my mouse. Good thing we got a solid table that I can just like bang, right? But like they feel alienated, right? People are talking about Albertan separatism. Like it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
I get it, but that
Aren't we
shouldn't
supposed to
happen.
be inclusive in this country? Is that
Inclusive except for people who actually produce value,
anything?
right?
Real? Yeah.
So, which is Alberta. Anyways, that's like, let's have an energy policy,
All right.
and let's
get back onto this.
oh,
Point
what's the new
number 2.
Canada First?
Canada first? No.
That's the new slogan. Polyever's been saying,
Oh.
but that's part of it is like let's learn a little bit from this, and yeah, if we're gonna have frosty relations with the states, which we don't need to, but if we are, let's build some other trade partnerships.
Canada
Like, be
first.
smart about it.
It's like Make America Great Again, except for it's like Make Canada Great first, or for the first time. Like we never been great.
It doesn't fit on a hat.
Yeah.
Right? Make Canada Great. MCGA. It's MAGA is easy to say, but
yeah.
Maca. It's like McDonald's or something, a new sandwich. Anyways, what else do we got on the rant list here? Canada strikes on post. I don't
Canada
know.
Post on strike, you mean?
Oh yeah. Wow. Okay.
Canada Strike is on post.
Too much boxing in my youth.
Too much fentanyl?
Yeah, something. Maybe it's seeping into our food supply. But yeah, Canada Post is on strike.
Are they
I
really?
said, did anybody notice? Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, see?
that's why I haven't got all that junk mail. Like our blue box was not very full this time around. Like I put it. We share. We
Oh,
rent.
no.
We have tenants in the basement at our
Yeah.
house, and like usually the garbage is full.
Yeah.
And this time, just like half as much in the blue box.
We are going to put recycling companies out of business if we don't get Canada Post back on board. So I know that there are, there's like rural mail delivery and there's some business stuff, right? That depends on Canada Post, but like
Yeah,
really,
mostly it's just payments. So
yeah, we don't need those. But like really, who would miss them if they were gone? And maybe there's someone who works for Canada Post that's actually my father-in-law, but
yeah, no, I had a great relationship with their delivery guy. What do you call him? Postman?
you post person.
Yeah, great. Super nice. Guy.
Yeah, but I mean, if you see the stuff they're asking for, and I'm not saying this is your mail carrier who's being ridiculous, right? It's the union, as always, but they want like a 24% pay increase over 4 years or something.
So do I.
Yeah, I want it too. Like I want avocado toast, but Gideon hasn't made it for me yet.
That's because he's too busy eating it.
And there's some other ridiculous stuff, some gender inclusive. Oh, they wanted one of the demands was that sex change surgeries would be fully funded,
How does
by-
that have anything to do with the mail delivery?
or female delivery, or
Oh.
trans male delivery. You can have it any way you want, Brent. Look, it's the female man. It's not the male man.
I see where you're going with that.
No
So
wonder the dogs
they're on
bark at
strike
'em.
because they want that sorted out.
Oh man! And again, it's not like I'm sure your local mail carriers. Like I just want to deliver the mail.
Yeah.
But the union's driving all this, so. And maybe that's the title of this episode, The Female Man. But, I mean, they're just pushing themselves into irrelevancy,
Yeah.
right? Because I don't, other than junk mail, what do I get from Canada Post
Yeah.
that a private mail deliverer couldn't do?
Honestly,
Like,
I would pay Canada Post to get my mail and to make it digital and send it to me on my email so that it goes in my junk mail instead of my recycling bin.
Oh yeah.
Because now I don't have to get up early and walk to my garbage thing and put it out the road. Like I can just set up a rule on my email thing and filter that out.
But yeah,
Anyways, what impact is this going to have on people? We're a Two Stewards show. We're talking about like
stewardship.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's stewardship of our economy, right? I mean, so I think we're kind of reaching a bit of a climax here as far as like the Liberal government's been in power for 9 years. We're seeing like mass inefficiencies and all these examples come up, and like we got to be better stewards of our economy, of the government, of everything else. And, you know, this is just another example. Like it's a crown corporation that is on track to lose, I think $1 billion this year, something like that. Right. And it's like, it's pretty tone deaf to be asking for a raise when your company is like steadily losing more and more and more money. Right. And it's like, yeah, well, the federal government will just backstop it. Like, no, they shouldn't.
Yeah.
If it's
like
bad, cut it.
At a certain point, the services that the government provides, like they do have to be valuable to the citizens, right? Like people might argue, oh yeah, we need hospitals. Okay. We need hospitals, but like, how do we go about funding those? We need mail delivery. Like, do we really? And like, how much of a service does this have to be? What does it look like? If it's losing money, like it better be worth it.
Well, in urban centers, you could replace Canada Post like that with like better value, better everything. No questions asked. In rural centers is where you have rural areas where you have the problem where it doesn't make sense to. Like there's no economy of scale, so it's just going to cost you money to deliver mail and packages and whatever. But I mean, I don't know. You could work that out. But yeah, value for money, right?
All right, what else you got?
Okay, what else do we have? I don't know. We were forecast to have a bigger than promised deficit again, federal government. So Chrystia Freeland had said, you know, we're going to hit $40 billion deficit. And that's it. That's the buck stops here. The 40 billion bucks stop here. But anyway, so that is forecast for 46.8 billion. So that's missing the target. It's by the Parliamentary Budget Office. And I noticed just a tidbit in 2023, we had a deficit of $52 billion. So we've got the most spending, I think, ever on track for next year. For 2024, and like more than during COVID. And it's like, well, what's happening? We're not in this state of emergency anymore. Why are we spending so much? And some of that has gone to. There's been a few settlements with First Nations people. You know, there's some billions there, but just in general, like the spending is crazy. And, you know, it was justified during COVID that it was crazy because we have an emergency. We got to deal with all this stuff. But, like, what's happening now?
Yeah.
What's the justification? So
cleaning up the mess.
Yeah.
Pieces.
Yeah. So, anyways, some good news for everybody here. Just more Trump effect stuff, maybe quickly. Supreme Court in the States now, moving to the States, has ruled that Texas can actually enforce the border. Right, there's a big kerfuffle over that. They had put up razor wire, and then the border agents came and tore it down. Right, so now they're like, no, you can do that. Right, so I think this is just Trump effect. They know that it's coming, so just like, okay, let's do it. Well, part of it is also people, I think, are finding the courage now to just say what they think, because the new administration
which is kind of funny. Like, you want free speech? Like, just say what you think. No, I'm too scared. I don't know.
Well, it's so part of it is sort of the dying of the woke hierarchy, ruling classes, whatever you want to call it, where that's sort of being torn down. And people are now like, okay, I can actually speak out without fear of reprisals.
Yeah.
Because the people who are going to take reprisals against me are going to be gone.
Yeah.
So, you know, and that's not, you know, I've seen plenty of warnings that, like, just because there's no drag queen story hour or, you know, certain books aren't in your library anymore, doesn't mean that the woke culture or the threat is gone. And that's true. All the bureaucrats who pushed it are still there. And so now maybe they're afraid to say something. But they're all still there. They're all still going to push it in the ways that they can. Operation Chokepoint So I don't listen to Joe Rogan. Oh, maybe I got to start. But anyways, he interviewed Mark Andreessen, who's like big rich dude in the States, right? Venture capitalist. And yeah, the interesting conversation. So Operation Chokepoint was earlier in the Biden administration. And this, even before that, 2017. Anyways, this is where the U.S. government essentially squeezed people that they found undesirable, right? So you had with weed being legalized and escort services and stuff, what they did was they debanked a lot of the guys who were running these companies, right? So they would just, through non-governmental or quasi-governmental agencies, so not like an official ministry or official, what do they call it in the States? Department.
Yeah.
Right? But these other things that are not governmental. And that whole structure is under attack in the States, which is interesting. But they would use them to, like the Consumer Credit Bureau Affairs, I don't know, something like that in the States, who has a lot of sway over the banks. So essentially what they did was they just said to the banks, like, all these people, you know, if you allow them to use your services, we're going to come down hard on you. So all these guys who were into who were the weed entrepreneurs found themselves without banks, right? Their businesses had no banking services, which like just drove a lot of them to cash.
Yeah.
Like kind of crazy, right? And the same with escorts and stuff. So you can make the argument like, yeah, we shouldn't do that for those people, right? But what happened, Operation Chokepoint 2.0 is what people are calling it. We saw a lot of people in the crypto space get debanked. So anybody who had and I remember Joey and Len talking about this when they were starting their podcast and couldn't get banking services because they were talking about Bitcoin, right? People just said like, take Bitcoin out of the name, right? Yeah,
that's frequent in that space, right?
Yeah. So the same thing happened with this fella, Andreessen fella, gave lots of examples of like at least 30 tech founders who were debanked because they were in the crypto space. So Joe Rogan's like, okay, but like, and he just kind of said it matter of factly and moved on. He's like, oh, hold on, what do you mean debanked? Like, what do they do? If they had like $30 million in the bank, like, what did they do? He's like, right? They could not get credit cards, banking services, anything. So like, what do you do?
Okay.
Hold it in cash, like buy art, all this stuff. So, anyways, Silverbank?
Yeah, Silverbank?
Silvergate Bank.
Okay.
In the States, SVB, sorry.
Nailed it.
That's their stock ticker, SVB. Anyways, there's 2 or 3 major crypto finance banks where we saw they spun it as like, see how dangerous this is? Like, it's not stable. Like, no, they were forced out of business by the same group.
Right.
And just like crazy. And like these were major banks that were debanked.
So
because they were involved in crypto.
Is this Operation Chokepoint, like somebody's running this?
So Nick Carter, you can follow him on Twitter. He came up with the idea first, right? Because everybody was like, oh yeah, all these crazy, bad banking practices. And he looked into it and he's like, no, the fundamentals actually were not any worse than any other bank.
Yeah.
I think these guys were forced out of, and he did some more research. And he's like, yeah, they were forced out of business.
On the premise that crypto is dangerous or bad or illegal or.
Yeah, because Elizabeth Warren, a very influential senator in the States, does not like crypto and does everything she can to stop it, right? And it's just
when I look at crypto or Bitcoin, I would not equate those two, but let's say Bitcoin versus weed and escort services, I wouldn't put those in the same bucket. But like, how are you drawing a comparison here?
Well, because the same thing happened,
right?
The
so
very
if there's
same
anything that they don't
playbook
want
that they used on the weed stocks or the weed companies, they used on these crypto companies. And you could say, oh, it's crypto. What do I care, right? I'm Bitcoin only. But like, the point remains the same. They can do this, and they don't. This wasn't an official government act, right? This is nefarious. They're acting through this extra governmental agency. So it is a agency that's funded by the government. So the bureaucracy
has tendrils that just kind of like...
Yeah. And if they don't like something, then they squish it out. So
go listen to Mark Andreessen on Rogan.
Yeah, I mean, it's 3 hours or whatever, but there's segments where they've or people who have taken like 10-minute portions out. And anyway, super interesting. But it's really brings to, and I don't know how much of this we have in Canada, but in the States, anyways, you have a lot of agencies that actually, and they make decisions that affect businesses that actually have no business doing that. Constitutionally, it's supposed to be a department of whatever, like an official government agency that makes these decisions. So, and there's been a landmark decision, Chevron versus something. Anyway, I can't remember I'll have to look it up for another episode, but where essentially this power was it was around fishing, I think. Fishing boats had to have all these crazy regulations that essentially shut them down because somebody didn't like that industry and they challenged it and they won. So now the incoming administration is looking at all these quasi-governmental agencies saying like, we have so much red tape and bureaucracy in this country that is actually, you could say it's illegal, that it should not exist. We've just allowed it to happen. And we said, okay, yeah, this agency is in charge of that, so we can let them do that. But actually, no, we got to get rid of all of that. So potential big change.
Disruption,
yeah.
People in general like the status quo and they don't question things, right? They comply, and that's just the way we are set up. You go to school, you just learn the system, and that's been my kind of beef with the financial side of things too. Like as I've kind of gone on this journey of learning finances, and we went through like Rich Dad Poor Dad's book, right? And just you don't know what you don't know, and then you read a book and you're like, wait a minute, if this guy's true, then what about that and that and that, right? And if you don't have that tendency in your mind to question the status quo, like why our house is expensive, why is it hard to get a loan, or like why does my income not go as far as it used to, and like what is money? And then you ask all those kind of questions, and like you've talked about before, but going back to first principles, they're asking the next question, like, okay, well, maybe I'll read a book on that. And then you start, there's so many rabbit holes to go down, right? But I think just in general, people just accept the status quo and grind out like. Yeah.
And I think the government has a lot of effect actually on culture and how we think, right? If they make laws and
whether or not it's intentional or whatever, that's a different thing.
Well, they set the tone, and then people eventually just kind of adopt that.
Isn't that what does Alex say? Like if you get the business you tolerate, there's a lot around that. Like if you tolerate a certain behavior, let's say for example with your kids or in your marriage or whatever, like if you tolerate it, you're basically condoning it, right? So the government, if you tolerate a business practice, or like whatever, fentanyl drug labs or whatever in your country, what does that say to like everything, right? You get what you tolerate basically, or you even endorse what you tolerate. So if you have a family and you're trying to create a household, like when we talk about with C.R. Wiley, like setting a standard for your family. Well, in our case, that's based on the word of God. Like we go to that as our standard. And when you look at that, it's like, okay, all of your preconceived notions about how things should be. Well, this is God's word. This is God's standard.
Yeah. And sometimes that's like, you're radically different than your culture, right?
Oh, it's crazy.
You go back and you're like, wow, and like you say, we kind of take things for granted, and this is just how people do it. And of course, there's drag queens in the libraries. Like it's been happening for years now.
Like 2 years.
What's your problem, right?
Yeah.
But when you go back to like first standards, right? Like why? Yeah. And you go back to some kind of value system.
Yeah.
And especially hopefully the Bible. You're like, oh no, actually all of this is wrong and all of this should change. And and also like you're not the villain for suggesting this change, because when there's change, people don't like change, generally speaking. So once you're at a certain inertia, you don't want to change that. And if you try to change it, well, then you're kind of the villain, right? So if we're saying we can't have this stuff, should not happen, you're the villain because you're making all this change, right? And it's like, no, I'm not actually. Like, let's go back to where we started, how the country was founded, right? Yeah. It was a Christian country at its founding. If we want to go back to those roots, I'm not being the villain here.
I've been thinking about that, like going back to versus moving forward, based on first, like based on principles, right? Like, and I last election cycle with the U.S., I kind of was following the election a lot more closely and listening to a lot of these American talk show guys or whatever, right? And it's a lot of fun, and then like the sentiment is kind of like, we have to go back to the founding fathers. We have to go back to the way this thing started and the Constitution when it was 2 pages instead of like 10,000 pages. And I agree, right? That makes sense. But it's unrealistic to expect that to happen. And it's like, what can we do now? Like, we're not going back to that. So how do we move forward towards a world?
But why not?
What do you mean? Why not go back to it?
Why can't we go back to it?
Like, I just think with our current world, with technology, with opportunities, with the way life is, the way our infrastructure has been built, like what's available to us, like it's unrealistic to think like we're just going to go back to. I get the principles and like I agree on that, but I just think we need to paint the picture rather than like let's go back. It's let's go forward towards these principles. Like that we want the same principles, we just want to move forward towards them, not back towards them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I get what you're saying, but I mean, the more I look at it, the more I see like there's timeless principles, and so number one, like you have the Word of God, you have God and His just the natural laws that He has set in place, right? Moral laws. So yeah, we should go back to those because they've always existed, right? So you can make the argument with the American Constitution. Like at one point, that was radically new. It was completely new. So we want to go.
People still call it an experiment, right? Or
exactly.
The greatest experiment.
That's right. So from that perspective, you could say like, why do we need to go back to that? Let's move. They were able to move forward and do something cool. Let's move forward and do something cool. But that's presupposing that there was nothing before that. And, and was that based on Christian principles? Yeah, a lot of it was. But we have something else that we can go back to, right? Word of God.
Yeah.
And so I think, we can move forward in that spirit and in that vein and look at different things. But those are the principles we have to go back to. And the more I look at it, when we're talking about the Western world, right? Countries were founded on certain values. Right? And those were Judeo-Christian principles. Those, and even culturally, we got to talk about Rome. So we go back to like the Roman Republic, for example, before the Roman Empire. Some of those values, even the Greek world, right? A lot of the thinking, the philosophy that we have now is influenced by that. That was the foundation and the basis for our country. So we're trying to abandon all that and do something completely new. And it's almost like, I'm not talking just about biblical principles here, but it's like we had a solid foundation, we built on the rock, and now we're trying to build on the sand.
Yeah.
Like, why are we making such a wholesale change if it's built on nothing? If we were going from one foundation to another, I could maybe see that. But we have a whole value system and everything else in this country. And people are like, oh, it's patriarchal, it's white European. Like, yeah, that's what the foundation was. And stop telling me that it's a bad thing. Yeah. Because it was not. And but we're, post national state, first post-national state. That's what Trudeau wanted, right? We're going from building on rock to building on sand, or worse than sand, nothing.
Yeah.
No standard of truth at all. And you wonder why we have problems. Of course we have problems. Yeah. Let's get back to our roots.
And it's hard to say, oh, that's a bad thing, because it's not based on anything.
No, and if we have a conversation as a country saying, okay, this is how we started, this was the foundation, we think we need a completely different foundation, and if we can have a national conversation and agree on that, okay, then let's do that. But that hasn't happened. It's just been a slow degeneracy.
Because the Canada Post's on strike. How can you have a national conversation when you can't even send mail back and forth?
It's part of the conversation, okay? Do we need mail? I mean, sending out Christmas cards has been a challenge for my wife, but there's ways
Maybe it's
around
part
it.
of the strategy to get people to connect directly in person, you know?
So it's a good thing. Is what
I just
you're saying.
send out an email with a Skype invite or a Teams invite, you know? It's like, or Zoom
Yeah.
invite. It's like, here's your Christmas card. 5 minutes with me saying, hi, Merry Christmas. Like,
Are you going to sing too?
yeah, I don't know.
Oh, man. Anyways, I think we should probably wrap up.
Yeah, I guess one more little thing. Just like we talk about the news, and I think the tendency is to get negative and get distracted and confused, and we've kind of summed that up. Yeah, sorry, Mark's like,
We do that very well.
I know. But that to put them into context, there's two contexts, right? There's like eternal context first you look at, right?
Yeah.
And so as Christians, you know, we do have that eternal perspective that I think we do often lose. Like when you're going about your daily work and your daily job and you got this like problems or issues or suffering in your life, and then you don't think about eternity. And, you know, when the Bible reminds us to, you know, put our treasure there, right? Like that's really put your heart on that, right? And I think that's a good reminder for people too. Like the suffering, the troubles, what does Corinthians say? Our light and momentary troubles are achieving for us an eternal glory that far outweighs them all, right? Like there is glory coming, and it cannot be stopped. Like it will not fade, right? It outweighs all of the sufferings of this life. And that gives us reason to pursue the things in this life that give God glory, right? And another thing too, like, Romans says, consider that our present sufferings are not worth comparing with the glory that will be revealed. So it's a good reminder that when we look at news, current events, and then there's another context that, like, okay, if we start with the eternal context that puts this in perspective for us as Christians, there's also like another context that I just read this book, The Psychology of Money. We're going to probably do a book review on this. Morgan Housel. Anyways, a few people recommended it to me. I had never picked it up, but it's got a unique kind of perspective on, it says timeless lessons on wealth, greed, and happiness. It's interesting talking about psychology of money, right? And how we think, how money is about, you know, more about how we behave than about, you know, being smart with money, right? Or like knowing the right things. You can know the right facts about money, but if you behave foolishly, or you behave selfishly or greedily, you can make very unwise decisions. And so in the spirit of kind of this podcast and stewarding your money, I actually recommend this book, people. Check it out. Maybe we'll link it to the show notes. But there's a quote in here that says, you need short-term paranoia to keep you alive long enough to exploit long-term optimism. And I think
all about that short-term paranoia.
I know our episodes kind of seem like short-term paranoia quite frequently, I think. And I think that's what gets catchy headlines or catchy podcast titles, and like it gets listeners and whatever. But at the end of the day, like those short-term things don't really, like, it's not a big, it's a blip. What did Tom always says, right? Like short-term paranoid, long-term optimistic. Like we have a long-term belief, that a thesis that we subscribe to, and we stick to that. And the short-term paranoia is helpful in as much as it helps you to be aware of what's happening and stay in the game long enough to exploit the long-term benefits of it, right? Because investing is about time, and stewarding your wealth is about searching out things that you can, over the long term, invest in and build, right? You're not going to build a successful family in one day. You're not going to build a successful household or business or country or anything. It's not going to happen overnight, but over time. Yeah.
But that is also based on making everyday decisions.
Yeah.
Right. So
and that's where the short-term paranoid comes in, right?
Well, yeah, you talk about the eternal perspective, right? And I totally agree. That informs everything we do. But I don't, you know, and maybe this is wrong. Call me out on it, but I don't think about eternity every day.
Yeah.
Right. I have that, like, that's sort of the base, our base case, whatever, like for how we act.
Oh, Mark, you got to think about it. I actually do. Like, well, when the Lord's Prayer, it says, and the Lord's Prayer is a daily kind of reminder, right? Yep. Like, you know, your kingdom come. So seeking that is in twofold, right? It's in God's kingdom coming eventually, but also on this earth, right? Yeah. So if you pray for that regularly, I think it's a daily reminder of.
So we do, but what I'm saying is I don't, like, ponder it.
Yeah, it's not like you're
deeply.
doing about your work.
Well,
Mark, why are you looking up into the sky again?
exactly right. So, no, but what I mean,
fixing my eyes on what is not seen, Brent. What?
I do that
what
when
is
I'm
not
driving. And my
seen?
wife's like, "Pay attention." I'm like, "Oh yeah, right."
What is seen is temporary. What is unseen is eternal.
So I'm just for myself, anyways. That's just not how some people do, and
Yeah.
that's great. But other than we read the Bible, we pray, and we think about God's kingdom. But that informs how we act and how we make our short-term decisions, right? So you have to have that, like you're starting a company, you need to have a vision of what you do, what you hope to accomplish. But then that sort of trickles down into different departments, and then the decisions you make within those departments, and like the decisions you make every day. So building a family, for example, it doesn't happen overnight. Part of it happens overnight, but
That's funny because the quote goes on to say more about over the course of your lifetime as an investor, the decisions that you make today or tomorrow or next week will not matter nearly as much as what you do during the small number of days, likely 1% of the time or less, when everybody else around you is going crazy. There'll be a few key decisions in your life. You got married, you had a kid. Okay. There's also a few key events too, right? Like, you could have a loved one pass away. You could have, an accident or an illness, or those things can be life transformative. And I think for people who go through those sorts of sufferings or pain, where the pain or the suffering or the anxiety in their life is constantly in front of them, then it's easier to probably naturally think about eternity, right?
Yeah, those big events really get you focused on that.
Like if things are going
reflection.
well, it's like, oh, okay, well, I want to be here. I don't want to be in heaven,
Yeah. And I'm not saying never think about it, or that I never, you have to take time to reflect on that. But anyways, I'm just saying so that informs my day-to-day decisions and how we act. And, and this is why I get worked up about a lot of this stuff, because I need to structure my life in a certain way, and I want to have the information and make the right decisions, and what's happening in Canada, right? How can we change this? Do we get involved in politics because I'm so up in arms about this, right? And then, but what does it mean for my family? What does it mean for my church, right? How are we going to be able to, if this certain thing happens, how do we respond, right? Euthanasia or MAID, all these things, right? And then, I know we talk about the economy a lot, but hey, that's kind of our thing. But that's also okay, what does that mean for my business? What does that mean for my kids? Are we going to stay in Canada? Is there going to be a future for them here, right? And so these things I think about every day, and it's all the accumulation of small decisions that leads up to the helping me make the bigger ones, I guess, right? So that explains my I'm just trying to justify my paranoia a little bit. My short-term paranoia. But that's always with that long-term view in mind. It's not like there's no goal.
What they're saying is that the two things can go hand in hand, right? You can be optimistic about the future in the long term, right? And I think, I am. I believe, the future, we can have a lot of impact on it as well. And if you pick an investment strategy, and when you're specifically talking about finances, if you stick to it in the long term, you can have success. Okay, well, what's going to derail you is these little events that pop up where all of a sudden, I got to do that instead, right? And then pull money out and go do that. Or so the short-term paranoia is what helps you kind of stick in it so that you can benefit from the long term.
Yeah.
So, anyways, we'll have to go through that book. I mean, people can get a start on reading it, and then
that's your homework.
Yeah, there's
the
a homework.
Psychology of Money.
And stay tuned for the merch that's coming out.
Yeah, merch store, baby. I'm looking forward to that.
If you have any specific requests, send them in. Gideon will be all over it. Right, good?
All over it.
Okay, thumbs up.
All right. Thanks for listening, folks. And until next time,
steward your wealth wisely.